All right. Hello. Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Leveraging Cybersecurity for Competitive Advantage. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jeff Smith, one of today's panelists and CEO of Connect 360 Digital. Today marks a very interesting day. It's the launch of Connect 360's Business Intelligence Series, a collection of webinars designed to provide expert information and provide updates for various businesses. In this series, we cover a range of practices and knowledge transfers to help organizations stay informed and competitive. Our format is to partner with various experts to share intelligence that is vital for today's business. Today, we have partnered with experts from Vistrada to bring you the latest insights in cybersecurity. Next month, we will co-host a webinar on ADA compliance with more relevant topics and insights to follow. For today's business transfer, let's quickly review our agenda and notable information share options. So I'm going to run through this pretty quickly. Slide change, please. Okay. For today's presentation, we will cover 5 major areas, which you see right now, with Q&A. And we will also have 3 poll questions throughout the presentation to field responses in key areas. We have a live QA widget if you wish to have or pose a question, so please place it there. Or if you wish to pose a question directly to one of today's panelists, you can enter it in the chat. The QA widget works so that you can see answers among all of us attending. Lastly, know that this session will be recorded, as you probably have received indication, and a follow-up email from Zoom will point you to the right area within 24 areas, and that connection will give you where you can view, download, or share the information with others. Okay, so to get started, we will quickly introduce both companies and panelists with the presentations to follow. Slide change, please. Great. Our team. So quickly, I'll introduce Connect 360. I lead the team. Our aim is to provide data-driven marketing solutions that spur growth, amplify product, service, and brand visibility, and nurture enduring client relations. Our team has extensive experience working with various verticals in B2B and B2C, notably in fashion, finance, food, pharma, with a little chuckle there, and everything manufacturing. As listed here in front of you, we have a full service ROI enabled approach that focuses on building market intelligence, hyper-targeting, and leverages return insight to all marketing deliverables. Our major areas where we deploy our ROI enabled approach are branding and market positioning, building and enhancing online presence, leveraging lead generation and sales support, employee engagement and internal communications, yet the list goes on, content creation, event planning and management, SEO, SEM strategies, and not least but CRM integration, lead flow, and customer retention. Right, that covers a lot of ground, of course. And if you wish to seek more information, we'll post information in the Q&A bin so that you could take a look at that. So let's hear from the Showcase Intelligence team of Vistrada. Please welcome Royce Marcosi, Chief Information Security Officer, and John Brumfield, Business Enterprise Risk and Cybersecurity Executive. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Awesome.
Yeah, and thanks. First off, thanks for having us as the first in your Business Intelligence series. Really appreciate the opportunity. Before we get into the topic of today's webinar, if you could get the next slide, love to talk just briefly about Vistrada and who we are. Vistrada is an IT management consulting firm. For the better part of 17 years, founded in 2007, we've been providing business, technology, and risk management services to mid-market upwards to Fortune 100 enterprise clients. As a minority woman business-owned entity, we provide in our core service portfolio strategic advisory services, data analytics and business intelligence services, risk management services, which spans third-party risk, integrated risk management, and GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, cybersecurity, which of course is the topic of today's webinar, and technology solutions delivery. On the managed services side of things, I'd like to just kind of call out our virtual Chief Information Security Officer services, which leverages a team-based approach that we provide to our clients to help them both define and really uplift their information security programs to enhance their cybersecurity posture and address some of the business objectives around their risk and cybersecurity needs. We're headquartered in New York. We do have presence across the country, predominantly in Texas, Chicago, and Florida, which is where I reside. So Jeff, thanks again for having us. As we get into the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to, again, Royce Marcos, our Chief Information Security Officer, to talk about why this subject is so important for us and for the people that are here attending today. So if you go to the next slide, please.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks, Jeff, for the introduction. For the folks on the call, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe good night, wherever you guys are. Super excited to talk to you today about my favorite topic, cybersecurity, why it's important, why you guys are here, and why it has a lot of effects for direct business implications, right? We really want to talk about some of the trends we're seeing and how we can use cybersecurity to really be an advantage for your organizations. So before we dig in and go through some of these areas, I want to just look at showcase this slide right here, right? So we're looking at the world's biggest data breaches and hacks, right? So this website is very important to showcase that, hey, there's a lot of organizations that have big security teams, infinite budget, and they're still getting breached, right? Government entities, Facebook, social media companies, telecom, they're all getting breached. And if they're having problems, imagine what's happening to small, medium-sized organizations, right? So we're going to jump in and talk about financial loss because it's a major topic as we talk about cyber attacks. Why is that, right? So cyber attacks are starting to happen more often. They're frequent. We're seeing folks are getting locked up on their machines, and it's starting to become a major problem. When you have breach reports by IBM, it showcases that the average breach is now costing companies $4.45 million a year, right? So for a breach. And that's just really important facts to figure out, hey, if I have a breach, do I have insurance to cover me? And what is this going to do for us from the bottom line perspective, right? And even with other companies getting breached, for example, Target back in 2013, their breach cost $200 million, right? So, and that's just the starting point. And as ransomware gets more prevalent, we're seeing more and more issues as far as how much these hackers are getting from companies. Not to mention reputational damage, as you work hard to build your name and trust for your organization. Just one breach can really cause some reputational damage for companies, and we're seeing that across industries, right? So, case in point, Equifax, they got a breach back in 2017, 150 million records taken, right? So that was huge for them, and it took many years for them to just recover trust for companies. And then downstream impact of that, operational impacts, right? You have your legal teams tied up, security teams working on incidents, your executives are having heartburn of what's happening, what do we need to convey. So that's just taking away from their priorities and what they need to do to make money and operate. So all these things have interlock there. And then not to mention you're building, we talked about building up the name and trust. And if you continue to go through breaches, customer dissatisfaction is definitely going to be impacted, right? So we've seen companies like LastPass, they've gone through multiple breaches, and it's really causing customers to second guess and think about, hey, are there other tools and solutions that I could go to prevent my data being breached, right? And then ultimately brand erosion. If you continue to get hit, it's going to take a loss of market share for your organization. Customers are going to leave. They're going to look at other tools, right? So all of these have interconnection points, and this is really why cybersecurity is very important to companies. Next slide, please. Next slide, we're going to talk about top cyber trends that we're seeing in the second half of 2024, things that we need to be aware of, and kind of the trends that are happening there from a cybersecurity perspective. Cybersecurity threats continue to evolve and become more and more sophisticated. We're seeing a huge spike in ransomware attacks, right? Ransomware attacks increased by 93% in 2023. Global damages are projected to be at $20 billion in 2024. So we know for a fact, once this happens, it's major, right? And a lot of times the foothold when the bad actors get in, it's a lot of times ransomware attacks, and they know they can get a lot of money out of companies that pay. For them, it is a business, right? They do have daily stand-ups. They figure out what's working, what's not working, and how they can re-strategize and try to get a foothold in an organization. So it's really important to make an understanding of what's happening out there and how to prepare yourselves for those type of attacks. And then AI-powered cyber threats, AI-driven attacks is expected to grow 45% in 2024, with AI phishing attacks seeing a 30% increase, right? So great tool. AI is really helping companies expand and operationalize quicker. But in the same vein, the bad guys are using those tools to really shorten that mean time to exploit companies, so they can get in faster and get their foothold and basically lock up organizations, as we talked about previously. Next one, cloud security challenges. 94% of organizations are moderately to extremely concerned about cloud security. 45% of data breaches in 2023 were cloud related, right? So example, just in the industry, I used to work for a large organization, vast amounts of budget to build up their cloud instance, and they seem pretty great from their cloud security perspective, but they did have a third party as a consultant, and a top 4 consulting firm came in, a junior person came in, clicked the wrong button, and company got breached, right? So it may be that you're doing a great job in your organizations, but it could be a third party or a consultant that you're working with that may cause some heartburn for your organization. So something to be very cautious about when you're talking about cloud and the challenges there. Supply chain attacks, we're starting to see 62% of organizations experienced a supply chain attack in 2023. An estimated cost of such attacks, 1.5 million per incident, right? So as we talked about earlier, these costs are going up, and supply chains are going to be extremely important for organizations to really focus in on. And that really coincides with, we'll talk about it here shortly, third-party risk management and risk transfer aspects of that. But then evolution of phishing, right? Phishing really translates close to ransomware attacks. Phishing attacks accounted for 80% of reported security incidences in 2023. Targeted phishing attacks rose 67%. Really, that's the primary way of how these hackers are getting, they know your organization's, the users or your first line of defense, and if you have a good security program or not, they will start sending these phishing attacks, hoping that someone clicks the link and they can get a foothold into the organization. And then from there, move on to more sophisticated attacks where they can lock up machines using ransomware, etc. Next, we're talking about increased focus on risk transference and third-party risk management, kind of closely aligns with supply chain attacks. Really, organizations, the goal is to understand what type of data you own in the organization. Do you know what your crown jewels are? How are you protecting that? Do you have regulatory requirements of protecting that data? And then from there, are you holding accountable your third parties to the same security posture that you have in your organization? So that's the goal there. Next slide, please. As we talked about all the various problems in security, the flip side of the coin is there's millions of billions of security companies and tools out there, all ready to help you out. It's a crowded, fragmented ecosystem. So we'll talk about later the various aspects of those tools, challenges, and really how do we start as a mid-sized organization with a lot of these companies. They have big budgets and such, but smaller, medium-sized organizations, they don't have that luxury. Where do you start? Where do you focus your attention on? And we'll get into that. Excellent.
Great. Well, Royce, already just a tremendous amount of information. So what we're going to do, like we mentioned at the top of the show, is we're going to launch our first poll. So next slide, please. And launch poll. All right. So what this poll is asking, just as the first one, real quick, is which cybersecurity risk do you perceive as the most significant to your organization in 2024? I'm sure you have a couple of things in your mind, but think about what is the thing that mostly is going to be, or some of the things that are going to most affect your organization. So we'll just take a few moments here for this to answer and then reveal the poll results. So we have, as A would be AI-powered cyber attacks, B would be supply chain vulnerabilities, C, ransomware and data extortion, D, insider threats, E, cloud security breaches. So we have responses coming in and hope to reach 100% of those attending. All right, so let's get right into it. Let's see what the results say. Sorry, I'm looking away because I have to see another monitor. All right, so we're waiting for the results to be tabulated. And so there's a good cross section here, right? So ransomware and data extortion resounding at 53%. We've got that followed by AI-powered cyber attacks, and then a quick tie on insider threats and cloud security breaches, followed by supply chain vulnerabilities. I can't say that. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to hand it right back to Royce to continue the presentation. All right, you can pull the
yeah, I think just on my end, I'm not surprised to see the top two being AI and ransomware. I think Royce would agree. There's
Absolutely.
plenty of interplay between the two, as he mentioned earlier. AI-powered phishing, contextual-based social engineering, all driving towards tricking the human element of cyber. And too many people are still falling victim because it's just become more sophisticated. And it kind of leads to the next slide I know Royce is going to cover, which is like, how do we flip this on its head, right? Like Royce, you spoke a lot about all of the bad impacts, from a cyber perspective. And so how do we then flip this on its head so that, those that are being proactive around cyber have that competitive advantage? So you can go to the next slide, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. So yeah, a lot of the things that we talked about earlier, we could flip that for competitive advantages. Before we dig in, we're seeing things in the news, right? It's folks that are large entities, downstream impacts of not taking the proactive actions of adding those security controls in their organizations. CDK Global, large car dealer software that they got ransomware, and downstream impacts of that, right? So as a general user, you're calling in or you're trying to buy a vehicle or try to get some information on your tires, not able to do that for 2 weeks because they're dealing with a major ransomware issue. So finally, they pay their ransom and unlocked their data, right? So and then you Snowflake and AT&T all kind of related there, right? So these are things that are happening on a weekly, daily basis. How do we fix this problem, right? So, and then jumping in, data protection, as we talked about, understanding your crown jewels of your organization, where that data lives. Do you have pockets of data lakes all across your organization? Are you consolidating that? Do you have the right specialized team to ensure the controls are in place to ensure you are taking proactive measures to monitor and take care of problems and breaches when they happen? And then on top of that, privacy. Companies are, and I mean, users are actually very concerned about their privacy, how their data is being used, working with your privacy teams alongside data protection to make sure that if you don't need data any longer, to make sure that gets wiped away, or you cover up sensitive information across your company where need to know, right? So those are very important factors. If you do that and communicate that across companies, and end users love hearing, how companies are doing that. If you get breached, do your due diligence, understand what happened, but then be proactive and letting customers know, yes, we did get breached. We have contained it. This is what happened. I think that really goes well with consumers. They know these things happen, but if you're hiding it or not providing up-to-date information about what you're doing to protect their data in the future, they will go elsewhere and find other companies to move their data to. And then regulatory compliance. You do have regulatory requirements based on certain aspects of data. Are you, as a team, proactive and making sure that you abide by those requirements? If you are, talk about it, right? Put it on your website. You are SOC 2 or whatever it is, regulatory compliance related. So it gives that additional trust to your consumers that you do take data seriously and you are up to speed of where you should be from a compliance perspective. When you do those things properly, you do gain that market share with customer trust, and it's just going to be fruitful from a stock price appreciation, making sure that customers are aware of where you are. You are doing your due diligence, and they will support you. They will grow with you, right? So those are some important factors that really align. And then customer satisfaction, trust, as I mentioned, goes along with those pieces. And operational efficiencies. We're seeing a lot of companies using technologies like AI to really speed up their engagements, internal, to automate things inside their company. It's great, but there are AI-related risks as well. So I think we do have a poll question there. I'll pass it over to you, Jeff or John.
Yeah,
No,
actually,
I just want to follow. Yeah, go ahead. Go, John.
Go ahead. No, I think that there were some interesting things you brought up there, Royce, that I just want to kind of just reemphasize, which is, I think every business needs to take the approach of it's not a matter of if they're going to get breached, it's a matter
Absolutely.
of when.
That's right.
And like you said, if you have that proactive preparedness from an incident management perspective, and you can quickly and resiliently bounce back, that speaks just as much to a mature cybersecurity posture as to the more common technical kind of proactive defenses. And like you said, AI could certainly be a part of that equation, where we can leverage that as a tool to bounce back quicker as a business. So yeah, sorry,
Absolutely.
Jeff, what were you going to say?
Absolutely.
No, and I just know firsthand on the CDK business news that we have here, not to spend too much time on this, but this is that's like the most news that you see, but the indirect stuff is just so amazing, right? I know car dealerships that got grossly affected by this. So it's 3 weeks completely not doing anything, no paperwork, no trading, no nothing, right? No inventories coming in and going out. And so it really has these sort of like almost tertiary impacts, right? That no one really understands, and it was just remarkable, when that happened. So I just want to add that to conversation, just so that people have this sort of realization, not to scare everybody, but this is more than just money, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good
cool.
point. As we get into the thing, it's not just a matter of if you're going to get attacked, but it's a matter of if your partner or when your partners are going to get attacked, right? When anyone in your ecosystem is going to get attacked, how are you protecting yourself? So yeah,
That's right.
getting
Great.
into the next survey.
Yeah, right. So slide change, please. All right, if you could launch the poll. All right, so this one, we're just going to go through this pretty quickly, right? So the question is, does your company currently track and manage AI-related risks in your organization to the best of your knowledge? Please answer A, yes, extensively, B, yes, but only to a limited extent. C, no, but we are planning to. D, no, we do not track AI-related risks, or E, we're just unsure. So if you would take this time also to answer that poll, that'd be wonderful. And just a reminder, if you have any of the questions of which you're wanting to ask the panelists, please use the QA or the chat either in order to pose questions, so that we can address it either immediate or we're going to follow it up as a QA session at the end. Okay, cool. So if you would launch the responses, that would be great, just so that we have a little bit of an understanding as to where we are. Okay, very close, right? So B, yes, we're only to a limited extent was 29%. The tie was on D and E, right? No, we don't, and unsure. And then that's followed up by no, but we're planning to, and yes, at 10% extensively.
Yeah,
Very good.
yeah. These results
Yeah,
are. Sorry, go ahead, Royce.
Oh no, go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say these results are encouraging, right? over 50% either are or are planning to. I think that speaks to, I think everyone's up to speed now on the AI threat and what the implications are to that. So seeing over half of the respondents either planning to or actually going, in the process of doing that is great. But on the flip side, you've got, almost half that are unsure or not. And, obviously there's education and enablement. It's such a relatively new and quickly evolving landscape of technology. So I'm not surprised by that side of it as well. Royce, what's your opinion here?
Yeah, I was going to just say that a lot of organizations, they may not really talk about to their employees about AI. Some do, right? And it's the companies that are proactive and starting to have those conversations where either they're building policies of what is best practices when we talk about AI. What technologies are you allowed to use? Those companies are going to be ahead of the game, right? So these employees, they're looking at these tools and technologies, and they're going to jump on it any way that they could speed up their processes and do a better job at certain aspects. They're gonna take advantage of these tools. So as a company, it's always wise to grab the horns and build those policies out sooner than later.
Yeah, and the interesting thing on this, because I think about some of the other statistics we've seen, especially in the mid-market, where it's also this 50-50 balance of mid-market companies that are actually proactively addressing cybersecurity, and there's still a very large portion that are not. And my assumption here, and I think we both agree from what we've seen, in our experience, is that there's just an unsureness around like how to begin, where to start. AI has certain frameworks that we're starting to see come up that obviously we're leveraging with our clients. But there's certainly a process here that a lot of businesses are not aware of, right? And I think that kind of is a good segue into the next slide, talking about, how do you get started especially as a mid-market business, how do you get started on the right path to a cybersecurity posture? So if we get to the next slide.
Thanks, John. Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite slides because it really digs into the full roadmap of where do you start as a company. We showed the slide earlier of all the tools and technologies, but before you get to tools and technologies, you really want to talk about executive buy-in, right? That's number one. Really, the executives set the tone for the entire organization, right? Aligning the business to the strategic initiatives of the organization, and it also showcases the culture of the organization, where executives are saying, "Hey, employees, we're all in the same boat here. You're responsible. This is everyone's responsibility, and this is important. This is why we're setting a budget." And we're blessing this as a project, and this will, move on and, building out this program for good. So getting that top-down approach is always a great starting point. It's building that foundation, and it's really going to drive that roadmap for the organization. And step two, selecting a framework. This is kind of the Vistrada way of doing it, but a lot of best practices here there, right? There's a lot of frameworks that provide that structure for organizations so they can quickly assess where they are at a given state of their security posture. Maybe they're just starting the journey or have a mature program and just want to vet it against best practices. So there's frameworks like NIST, ISO, CIS, PCI, whatever it is, whatever applies to your organization, and many frameworks out there, but it helps you get started. It showcases, a base minimum of standards that should be applicable from a best practices perspective, and where you kind of fall into that framework. With that, once you do that, that really highlights where you are as an organization, and then ultimately, what you're trying to drive is gaps. Where are we missing the mark? Where do we need to improve our organization? Where do we need to get some funding, budgets, whether it's people, processes, technology? That is really the goal of the gap assessments. And then from there, pulling those gaps into a risk review process, right? Creating a plan of action. How are we as a company going to address those gaps that were identified? How is it tactical? Is it strategic? The timelines associated, who's on point for fixing that gap, and then assigning ownership. And then I think that's very key, right? If you have it tracked as a gap but no owner, things are going to fall on the wayside. You need someone that's the owner and that's going to provide updates on a frequent basis. So you're going to have some cadence on regular risk review meetings, and then identify where you are and are you meeting the timelines that were set for resolving, and then ultimately applying the controls that are necessary to close each, right? So within those gap assessments, you'll identify what the risk is, how are you going to fix it. Sometimes it's perfectly fine to say we're not going to address this risk, it's too low, or we're going to use insurance to cover that, but it has to be documented at some point in some form or fashion. In other cases, you are going to be applying controls, whether it be preventative, like a firewall, detective, like IDS, IPS systems, or corrective, right, like your incident response plan or security policies, right? So there's different ways of applying controls in the organization, and those are all based on what's identified through your risk assessments. And then, last but not least, is continuously monitoring those, right? As we know, proactive defense is really looking at things in real time. What are your threats? How are things are changing in the organization? We talked about AI as a new threat to organizations, as it's a positive, but it also has the negative things that you want to be careful about. Also visibility, right? From your continuous monitoring, you want to know what's out there for your sector. How are companies getting breached? How do we protect ourselves and put controls in place so we don't fall victim? And then gaining insights using your technologies, right? Threat intelligence, sharing that amongst your peers across sectors internally, and making sure your security teams have the latest and greatest information so they can provide that control and that monitoring that's needed for you to adapt to new threats that are happening in the wild.
Yeah, and if I may, a couple of things, and I love this slide as well, right? It says there's a number of things I just kind of distill from this. First is, and Royce, I know you agree because you see this with clients that come to us after an incident. What we've typically found is most businesses start the process at number 5, right? They take a very technology-driven approach, thinking that's going to solve the pain, and they're looking at, and that slide you showed earlier on was a great kind of example of the ecosystem. I mean, there's literally thousands of technologies out there, all kind of promoting them as the best solution for whether it be EDR or email protection or network protection. And so a lot of businesses are really starting at number 5. They're setting up technology stack, they're monitoring, and then when they fall victim, they're wondering what happened. And really the challenge is they haven't set the right foundation, right? They haven't gotten
Exactly.
a culture of cybersecurity in the organization. They haven't set up a framework to work against that is holistic and looks at, like you said, Royce, people, process, and technology. Technology last on purpose because, as you saw from the statistics, a lot of the incidents we see are people and process driven. So it's very important if you're a business that's really trying to do this the right way to follow this order of operations. And then the last thing I'll say is, the great thing about showing this as a cycle is that, some businesses also make the mistake that think that cybersecurity is kind of this one and done, right? We're going to plug
Right.
something in, we're going to put some policies in place, set it and forget it. And that is just the worst mistake a business could make. It's certainly a cyclical thing that continues. It continues to evolve as the sophisticated attacks evolve. And again, as part of a cybersecurity culture in a business, you really got to look at it as a normal order of operations and really a best practice from an operational perspective. So,
Yep, absolutely.
Sorry, next slide.
All right, so the next slide is really about the cybersecurity blueprint, and this is really what we use at Vistrada to come in and dig deeper into how we fix some of these areas right away for companies that are just starting their journey, right? So if we look at the first tower, evaluate, recommend, or select areas of your business to ensure adequate security practices and protections are in place, right? So we talked about starting off, where are some of these gaps? We need to do a frameworks assessment as a company, identify what frameworks really work best for our organization. And then from there, building out those IRPs and policy areas that are gaps that need to be refreshed for the organization. And, we see time after time, companies that have incidents, they jump on the incident, contain it, and then move on to business as usual, never coming back to, oh, should we have created an incident response plan so that we could avoid this type of situation going forward, training our employees so they know who to contact when they see such attacks, and then really closing those gaps long term. So that's really the goal here, is to build out that portfolio of policies that really makes sense for the organization alongside the frameworks that we talked about earlier. And then risk mitigation evaluations, what makes sense for the organization. Do we add controls to the organization? Do we get insurance, et cetera? So that's a conversation for risk strategy. And then pen testing, vulnerability management, those are going to be some key areas that they're going to help you evaluate where you are, right? So making sure that you pen test your sensitive crown jewels of the organization, making sure that you take a proactive stance of understanding where your holes are and getting controls in place to close those holes before the bad guys are automatically doing this by default, right? They have open source tools, they have paid tools that they run all the time, knocking on the door of organizations, finding out, hey, this 0-day announcement just happened from Microsoft, let's say, and we're saying like even 15 to 30 days where those announcements happen, and the bad guys are already breaching companies because now they know, hey, this is a 0-day. Microsoft hasn't patched yet, and it's fair game, right? So as we mentioned before, they do have these stand-ups, and they're talking about how they can strategize and get into organizations. So you want to be proactive, making sure your vendors are getting those patches in place quicker, so you as companies can patch those devices quicker. Vulnerability management is also the other side of it. It's like you have the information, but if you don't have the teams internal to support and close those holes, it does no good to your organization. So it's very important, as John mentioned, to ensure that you have that people aspect and process aspect in place to really close those reports, those pen test reports and vulnerability reports that you get as an organization. The second pillar here we have is remediate and protect, ensuring end-to-end management of cybersecurity and compliance on easy-to-use platforms to close your gaps. We at Vistrada use a tool called Aptiga. It's our GRC platform where we quickly, when we assess organizations, we choose a framework, use that tool to really build out, that assessment of where they are, where the organization is at any given state. And then from there, we add a lot of evidence items and building that visibility for security teams and executives to understand, right now you're at this juncture, the goal is to get to this line, and this is how we're going to start building our roadmaps to make that finish line, right? So that's not to say you have to have a tool. Tools make it a lot easy, but you can do this on a spreadsheet if you're just starting off. But if you have a tool in-house, it makes it a lot easier. We can start assigning and automating some of those processes going forward. Phishing simulations, it's always good to have those in place where you have security awareness training by default, but if you're not testing your employees and understanding who those clickers are and giving them additional training, it's going to cause issues downstream, right? So, like we talked about, phishing is the #1 way that bad guys are getting into your network, and then from there, ransomware, et cetera. So you want to stop that, train your employees, and get better, which there's a lot of great tools. We use KnowBe4, wonderful tool of doing those training across the board. With that being said, tabletop exercises are going to be a must-have for organizations, right? So you're doing exercises where you bring your security teams, executives, business leaders in a room. Don't really give them much information. Just get them in a room. It could be online, and say, hey, we have this issue. For example, let's just say, since let's talk about an employee got phished, they got hosed. Now it just locked up one of our core processing applications in the environment. What do we do now? And it's really going through your incident response plan, training your teams so they know the steps to take when something happens, where they're better prepared. So when a real incident happens, no one's freaking out, and they know the steps to take. You have your incident response team ready to go, engaging. Your forensics or your technical teams are containing, evaluating the incident. Your scribers are, documenting what's happened, and your executives are briefed on the situation real time. So these are very important exercises to have, at least on an annual basis. More frequent be nice, but at minimum on an annual basis, so your teams are well aware of how we handle various aspects of real world situations. Another aspect is cybersecurity insurance reviews, right? We talked about $4.45 million per incident. If you're only, right now have insurance for $1 million, the rest of that's going to come, you have to pay that, right? For legal fees and things that could get very expensive. Planning for that in advance is always great, where you can leverage insurance where needed to, take the big brunt of those things, and then you could focus attention on other areas of aspects. And these things happen, right? So it's better to be proactive on your insurance strategy, making sure you understand where you are as an organization and getting the right money allocated to your insurance. And then physical security assessments. So a lot of times organizations don't think about, hey, I have data centers, I have offices, but and Wi-Fi. Do you test that? Are you looking at your badge access? Are you do you have a good understanding of who your partners are that have access to your physical environments, and what kind of data you have out there? Are employees printing out sensitive information? Are they just throwing it in the trash that someone can pick up and actually use? So those are conversations that should be had for every organization, looking at logbooks for visitors that are walking into your building. Those are going to be key aspects of monitoring. And then the monitoring aspect, continuous monitoring through risk posture, driving remediation activities, access to on-demand needs, incident response support, et cetera, right? So we talked about regular risk meetings. There's going to be very important looking at your risk posture as the organization. You may have selected a framework, but as you grow or acquire organizations, maybe that framework is not good enough and you need to expand into an ISO or, GLBA, whatever it is, making sure that you are changing your strategy and your postures based on your business strategies for the organization. And then prioritizing technology investments. We talked about people, processes, and then the third piece, technology investments. There's so many different choices as far as tools and technologies. Looking at best of breed technologies, identify what those are. Where companies such as Connect 360, Vistrada can help prioritize and help companies, find out where they are in the space, what their risks are, and what technology are good investments for your organization. And then incident response teams we talked about. I'm not really going to dig in too much there. And the dashboard. It's always good to get things consolidated into a dashboard where you have at any given state where your executives need to know where you are in your journey as far as security compliance and posture. You have something to pull up and showcase, hey, we're making strides, and our allocation of a budget. CFOs love seeing this, right? Where you're getting return on investment for your strategies, right? So showcasing that on a dashboard and getting a GRC team in place, governance, risk, compliance teams are going to be very strategic for the organization's success.
Yeah, I think, look, it's evident from this slide. There's a lot involved in cybersecurity, right? I mean, we're not going to sugarcoat it. It's a complex field. There are a lot of moving pieces. There are a lot of, attack vectors, let's call it. And, each of these blue boxes here could, double click into, a deck of 100 slides, right? And so that's why having a formal structured methodology and a blueprint, as Royce has kind of laid out here, is so important, because it helps to simplify the process as much as possible, which, process that's very complex. But at the same time, it ensures that we're checking all the boxes. I think the other thing to kind of take out of this as well is that cybersecurity is complex, and every business has its own unique requirements and constraints based on the way you operate, where your data and applications reside, who your partners are. So there's no one kind of blanketed solution, if you will, or program. We really have to take a number of different factors into account. And so that's why, leveraging these frameworks, really understanding the business is just as important. And so having that strategic advisory and that expertise, it plays a hand in that. So just my comments around this slide. And I guess we're going into our final polling question around cybersecurity budget allocation. So if we get into the poll.
Yeah, so launch the poll, please. So what we have here is, as it was alluded to, in a lot of this is now the awareness, right, on a monetary basis, right? So the question asks, what percentage of your organization's IT budget is allocated to cybersecurity initiatives, right? And then A through F here is less than 5%, 5 to 10, 11 to 15, 16, 20, more than 20%, and unsure. So if you would please help us with your placing your the best guess on what that IT budget might look like, that'd be great. Tremendous amount of content here. So after the poll, we're going to just go right into Q&A. So if anybody else has any other questions, I can see that Eric is very busy here. I've got a couple myself. So let's see what type of results we got. So yeah, predominantly unsure, right? So about nearly 60%. And the soon to be followed is more than 20%, right? At 12%. And less than 5%. So those are two that are equal. Sorry, 12%, read it wrong. But the rest is like 6%, right? 5 to 10, 11 to 15, and 16 to 20.
Yep.
Yeah.
No surprises here. I think it from a budget perspective for security allocations really depends on the sector and the industry. Seeing kind of range from 6% onwards, right? Depending on how large the organization is and the risks they face. So it can be kind of a widespread there.
Yeah, I'd say also, it's a significant budget item, right? Even at 5%, it's significant. So, the thing here is, how do you use the money that you have available in the most impactful way and in the wisest way? Kind of going back to technology, being, smart about not getting into too much technical debt and not solving root cause or solving some of the other factors is just as important because it can certainly have, that piece alone can certainly have implications to the P&L.
Absolutely.
Great. So let's you guys, can we launch into questions and start to field some answers here?
Sure.
All right.
Perfect.
Great. So I got one. If I can raise my hand here, and then we'll get to the Eric's. So I have a real case scenario, right? So I have a client manufacturer, B2B company, right? No e-com, right? So one of the things that I thought to raise in this conversations through Q&A is that a lot of the stuff seems to be forward leading into, so the cyber world of, online monies and transfers and stuff like that, similar to e-coms and those that are similar. But this is a straight B2B company, only works through that channel as a manufacturer, middle market, yeah. And the CEO wanted to pose the question because I couldn't make it, but essentially is like, and some of the step process we just heard was on, what are the gaps, right? But like in a real sort of scenario type of deal is like, this CEO really would like to say, okay, so what are my top 3 worries? Flipping the question back to you guys is like, what are those gaps that I need to take a look at as an organization, really consider? And then, how do I look at this as sort of a path process? What do I do? Okay.
Absolutely. I'll take that. So a great question. Absolutely. From where do we start, right? So we talked about what are the biggest risks to organizations, and that's ransomware, phishing and ransomware, right? So I would start there. Those are going to be your biggest threats. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, you can fall susceptible to that, right? So taking the back approach of, all right, so we know that that is the biggest risk. How do we protect ourselves from that? And that's through people, processes, and technologies, obviously, but tools that really protect your your inbox, your Outlook, right? So you're getting emails. Emails are used day to day for business operations. Do you have tools to protect phishing type attacks, security awareness training? That's going to be huge, right? Um, Training your employees to understand what looks normal, what looks off, and a lot of these things are, once you get breached, you don't really know about it until sometimes the bad actors pose as a vendor trying to get paid, and they'll hide all normal email from that user's inbox, and they will interject themselves in that thread and say, hey, they'll be in the environment for a long time, understand what normal is, and start convincing, accounts payable it's time to pay. And they say, hey, our account needs to change, our banking information change this and pay us. And a lot of times what we're seeing, some clients of ours in the past, they've done that and they've paid and then come to find out, oh crap, we got breached. We just our actual vendor is still asking for payment. So something happened here, and that's where they realize they got breached. So we want to avoid those types of situations. Start off with covering your bases. I would say good email protection, training, and then malware protection. That there's CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Microsoft Defender, those tools to really protect your environment. So in case something bad happens, you can contain it faster than not having any protection at all.
Yeah, I'd add too from a business risk standpoint, and I don't know if we covered the vertical that they're in, right? But you said manufacturing, B2B.
Just straight manufacturing, chemicals manufacturing.
Chemicals, yeah. So I think some other things to consider here, and in fact, B2B is where you're going to have more liability over B2C, right? Because it works both ways. You could become the victim of a third party risk, or you could be the source of a third party risk, and then you have to worry about, as a business, are you going to be liable to having exposed your partners to a cyber threat? So you've got that. You've got regulatory compliance concerns. You've got a whole host of risk management things that you really got to work to iron out and kind of go through. And that's a lot of the stuff that Royce mentioned, right? In that process of looking at framework design, looking at risk and gaps. And again, third party risk is huge from a B2B standpoint. So that's another area we would focus on. Yeah, so I see some questions here. I can certainly throw a few at Royce as well. And I think you kind of covered some of these, but maybe what do you think are some of the most common mistakes or misperceptions businesses have, when they engage with you as a CISO in the field?
Oh, that's another great question. So
Mhm.
one challenge I see is like, hey, we have a security team, so we should be good, right? Right, Royce? And oftentimes we have a lot of times, when companies get started, they really build up their IT, help desk, and they throw help desk folks into security roles, and then we see that, part of the problem is security. That may be the case a while back, but security has really gotten very specialized, right? You want to make sure that your teams internally um, are certified, have the experience in security technologies, and really able to pick up the burden of what that means for the company, protecting data, and then also involving. A lot of times I see silos, right? Organizations don't talk to other departments, and then they get into a lot of problems. I think security should really talk to a lot of the departments and be connected with them, right? Being very close partners with legal and privacy, because there's a lot of overlap in those divisions, and we see a lot of silos that need to be broken down so everyone's talking, and together I think it's going to be a win.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I know you mentioned, as part of the blueprint, you have to assess the organization. But part of that too is assessing the capabilities of the existing security team, right? I know that's something you do plenty of.
Yep.
Could you, kind of along a similar vein, right? Can you talk about how, some of the work you've done with a client has helped avoid what could have been a very bad situation? And maybe get into,
Absolutely.
specific example or
Yep.
two.
Absolutely, yeah. So we do provide regular pen tests for our clients, and as at that exercise, we talked about proactive and being visible, those actually have helped our clients in the past, where we've ran a scan and found out, for example, one particular use case, we scanned an IP that was provided to us, and they didn't realize that they had that asset, as a firewall, and that firewall has been running for a long time, out of support, out of service. It just does its job, but hasn't been patched in years, right? So it could have been a major problem for the organization. We were able to get them aware of that. They were able to swap that with a solution that's been supported. But things like that happen all the time, and it's just things that people don't think about. It's working. Why focus on that? But if you don't constantly know what your assets are, getting an asset inventory and then scanning those environments for vulnerabilities, I think you're in bad shape. So being very proactive is going to be important. Pen testing, vulnerability patching.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's another area that often gets missed, to your point with businesses, is they don't really put the effort or time and investment into running kind of a proper pen vulnerability exercise.
Absolutely. And
So
there's a
that's
lot
great.
of systems that run on, old school technology that has a set function or purpose, and they just don't think about, right? So scanning those assets are going to be very important.
Great.
Just looking.
Is there like a quick one more question that we can answer before we wrap things up? We've got a couple of minutes here.
Yeah. Actually, I think there's another one here. This is a good one. Studies show that multi-factor auth can prevent upwards of 60 to 70% of most common attacks and breaches. What are some other kind of impactful things businesses can, kind of in a short fashion deploy to help increase that percentage, in your opinion?
Yep, great question. MFA is huge, right? So I love that. I love that answer. Turn on MFA everywhere you can. Other things you can do: endpoint malware detection response, having a SIEM, security information event management system, centralized repository where all your security event logs go to. So you have basically a data lake of security events that is monitored 24/7, 365 by your security teams. So the more you see, the more you can help your organization. If you don't see it, you can't protect, right? So I think having that is going to be very important. A lot of companies are using SaaS technologies, right? And making sure that you have MFA turned on, as I mentioned, but then going and having your security teams look at how your SaaS is configured. We see a lot of clients get breached because they forget that they could have turned on MFA, or they could have had logging enabled into SaaS when something bad happened, and they have no information to really help with the investigation. So SaaS security going to be very important feature.
Awesome.
Great. Wow. I have to say, this has been like so eye-opening. Like I try to be on top of this stuff, and I learned completely like a whole lot of stuff from you guys. And so I just really want to thank, the Vistrada team of, John and Royce John, for helping us not only launch, our very first of this business intelligence series, but adding such great value. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
No,
Thanks for
thank
having
you.
us.
All right, great. So if anybody has any other questions or needs to contact information, you can go on the Vistrada website, it's vistrada.com, or go into Connect 360. We put our information into the chat. Hopefully that gets through. There could be some issues here, but you can pick that stuff up there on personal contact. But you could always reach us in one way or another, or find us on LinkedIn. One of the things I think we're going to be doing is changing our last slide, put the contact information up. How about that? So once again, I want to thank everybody for coming. We've got a ADA compliance presentation coming up in the second week of August. We'll be sending out a bunch of information for that. You should take a look at that, and then we'll be putting up a landing page for all the other different elements of business intelligence, insight, and so forth. So again, everybody have a wonderful day. Thanks very much. There will be a survey following that hopefully you could address and give us some insight as to some of the information that was presented today and its value. And like I said before, this is a recorded session, so you'll be getting the link from Zoom to the registration address that you provided. Thanks again and have a great day.